Let me ask you something important. If there really were one pill that helped most men get stronger, more reliable results when it matters, wouldn't you want to know exactly what it is, how it works, and what most people never get told about it? Because there's a lot of confusion, a lot of marketing, and a lot of half-truths out there. Today, I want to clear that up in a very simple, science-based way. When most men struggle in this area, the first instinct is to think it's a hormone problem or a motivation problem. But in the majority of cases, that's not where the real issue starts. The real issue is blood flow. If blood doesn't get where it needs to go efficiently and stay there, nothing else matters. That's the foundation. Now, the most studied and most effective class of medications for this problem works by improving blood flow through a very specific mechanism. These medications are called PDE5 inhibitors, and among them, the one with the longest track record, the most research, and the widest real-world use is sildenafil. Sildenafil doesn't force anything to happen. That's an important point. What it does is support your body's natural response. It works by blocking an enzyme that breaks down a molecule called cyclic GMP. Cyclic GMP is what allows blood vessels to relax and widen. When that molecule sticks around longer, blood flow improves, pressure is maintained, and the response becomes more reliable. That's why this medication doesn't work automatically. It works with your body, not against it. Without the proper signal, nothing happens. And that's actually a good thing because it means the process stays controlled and physiological. Now let's talk about why this one stands out compared to others. Sildenafil was the first of its kind, and because of that, it's been studied more than almost any other option. We're talking about decades of data across millions of men, across different age groups and health conditions. That matters. When something has that level of research behind it, you're not guessing anymore. You're working with evidence. Another reason it works so well is timing. Sildenafil has a predictable onset and duration. For most men, it starts working within about 30 to 60 minutes and lasts several hours. That window is long enough to reduce anxiety, but short enough that it doesn't linger into the next day for most people. But here's where most men get this completely wrong. They think this pill fixes the problem. It doesn't. It manages a symptom. The root cause is still there. And if you ignore that, the results may fade over time or require higher doses. The real drivers behind these issues are things like insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, stress hormones, poor sleep, and damage to the inner lining of your blood vessels. If your blood vessels are stiff, inflamed, or damaged, no pill will work as well as it should. This is why lifestyle changes dramatically amplify the effect of this medication. When you improve insulin sensitivity, blood flow improves. When inflammation drops, circulation improves. When nitric oxide production goes up, everything works better. The medication becomes more effective at lower doses, and the response feels more natural. Now let's address safety, because this is where fear often shows up. Sildenafil is generally very well tolerated when used appropriately. The most common side effects are related to blood vessel relaxation, things like mild headache, facial warmth, or nasal congestion. These are signs that it's doing what it's supposed to do. However, it is not for everyone. If someone is using nitrate-based medications for heart conditions, this combination can dangerously lower blood pressure. That's why medical guidance is essential. This is not something to guess with. Another important point is dosing. More is not better. Taking higher doses doesn't make results stronger, it increases side effects. Many men do extremely well on the lowest effective dose, especially when their overall health improves. Now let me say something that may surprise you. If this medication suddenly stops working, it's usually not because the pill failed, it's because something else changed in the body. Weight gain, worsening blood sugar control, increased stress, poor sleep, or nutrient depletion can all blunt the effect. This is where things like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, and omega-3 fats become important. These nutrients support hormone balance, blood vessel health, and nitric oxide production. Without them, even the best medication struggles to perform. And stress is a big one. Chronic stress raises cortisol, which tightens blood vessels and suppresses nitric oxide. You can't override that with a pill. You have to address the stress response itself. So if you're looking at this scientifically, the most effective approach is a combination. You use the medication as a support tool while you fix the underlying issues that caused the problem in the first place. That's how you get consistent, dependable results instead of ups and downs. Let me be very clear about one thing. This is not about age. This is about vascular health. I've seen younger men struggle because of insulin resistance and inflammation, and older men do extremely well because they took care of their metabolism. If you improve your diet, cut excess sugar and refined carbs, get adequate sleep, manage stress, and correct nutrient deficiencies, you often need less support over time, not more. So when people ask, what's the number one pill backed by science? The honest answer is sildenafil, because it directly targets blood flow, has the strongest research base, and works with the body's natural mechanisms. But the bigger answer is that no pill replaces healthy blood vessels. If you found this helpful, take a moment to reflect on what might be blocking blood flow in your own body. Fix that and everything else works better. And if you want more science-based strategies to support male health naturally, most men are told directly or indirectly that problems in this area are just a normal part of getting older, that once you pass a certain age, decline is inevitable, and the best you can do is manage it. But that explanation doesn't actually line up with the science. When you look closely at what's really happening inside the body, age by itself is not the main driver. The real issue, in the majority of cases, comes down to blood flow. Think about it this way. Any process in the body that requires firmness, endurance, and consistency depends on healthy circulation. Blood has to move easily through arteries, fill small vessels efficiently, and stay there long enough to create a stable response. If that system is compromised, nothing else can compensate for it. You can have normal hormone levels, strong motivation, and good intentions, but if circulation is poor, the outcome will be unreliable. Blood flow problems don't appear overnight. They develop slowly, often silently, over years. One of the earliest changes is damage to the inner lining of blood vessels, called the endothelium. This lining is responsible for releasing nitric oxide, a molecule that tells blood vessels to relax and widen. When nitric oxide is released properly, circulation improves. When it's reduced, vessels stay tight and stiff. Now here's the key point most people never hear. The blood vessels involved in this process are smaller and more sensitive than the ones supplying major organs like the heart or brain. That means circulation issues often show up here first, long before a major cardiovascular event. In many cases, these problems are an early warning sign of broader vascular dysfunction. One of the biggest contributors to reduced blood flow is insulin resistance. When blood sugar levels are chronically elevated, insulin levels rise as well. Over time, this damages blood vessels, increases inflammation, and suppresses nitric oxide production. Even if someone hasn't been diagnosed with diabetes, they can still have enough insulin resistance to impair circulation. Inflammation is another major factor. Chronic low-grade inflammation causes blood vessels to become less flexible. Instead of expanding easily, they resist movement. This makes it harder for blood to enter and stay where it needs to be. Inflammation can come from many sources, including processed foods, excess sugar, poor gut health, lack of sleep, and chronic stress. Stress itself deserves special attention. When the body is under constant stress, it releases cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are designed for short-term survival, not long-term health. They constrict blood vessels, raise blood pressure, and shift blood flow away from non-essential functions. If stress is constant, circulation remains restricted far longer than it should. Now let's talk about hormones, because this is where confusion often starts. While hormones do play a role, they are not usually the primary cause. In fact, many men with normal hormone levels still experience circulation-related issues. Hormones can influence blood flow, but they cannot override damaged or inflamed blood vessels. This is why medications that directly target blood flow can be so effective. Sildenafil works by supporting the nitric oxide pathway. Normally, when nitric oxide is released, it triggers the production of cyclic GMP, which relaxes smooth muscle and blood vessel walls. An enzyme called PDE5 breaks down cyclic GMP. Sildenafil blocks that enzyme, allowing cyclic GMP to stay active longer. What that means in practical terms is this: the signal that tells blood vessels to relax lasts longer. Blood flows more easily, pressure is maintained, and the response becomes more reliable. The medication doesn't create the signal, it simply prevents it from shutting off too quickly. This distinction is important because it explains why sildenafil works with the body rather than forcing an unnatural response. The process still depends on normal signaling pathways. If those pathways are completely dysfunctional, results will be limited. But in most men, the pathway is present. just weakened. Another important point is that sildenafil doesn't increase desire or change motivation. It addresses a mechanical issue, circulation. That's why its effects are so predictable across large populations. When the underlying issue is blood flow, improving blood flow produces consistent results. Now consider why this medication works better in some people than others. The difference often lies in the condition of their blood vessels. Someone who eats a diet high in refined carbohydrates and seed oils, sleeps poorly, and lives under constant stress is actively damaging their vascular system every day. In that environment, any medication has to work harder. On the other hand, someone who controls blood sugar, reduces inflammation, sleeps well, and manages stress has healthier vessels. In that case, the same medication works more efficiently, often at a lower dose with fewer side effects. This is why younger men can experience these problems. Age is not the deciding factor. Metabolic health is. A 35-year-old with insulin resistance and chronic inflammation can have worse circulation than a 65-year-old who takes care of their metabolism. Let's also address the myth that these issues are all in the head. Psychological factors can influence the nervous system, but they rarely act alone. Anxiety often develops after repeated physical failures, not before. When blood flow is unreliable, confidence drops. That stress then further constricts blood vessels, creating a cycle. Improving circulation breaks that cycle at the physical level. When the body responds consistently, stress naturally decreases. This is another reason why targeting blood flow is so effective. Now let's talk briefly about lifestyle factors that directly damage blood vessels. Smoking is one of the worst offenders. It reduces nitric oxide, increases oxidative stress, and stiffens arteries. Excess alcohol does something similar, especially when combined with poor sleep. Nutrient deficiencies also matter. Zinc plays a role in nitric oxide production and hormone signaling. Magnesium helps relax blood vessels and regulate stress hormones. Vitamin D supports endothelial function. When these nutrients are low, circulation suffers. Sleep deprivation is another hidden factor. During deep sleep, the body repairs blood vessels and balances hormones. Chronic sleep loss raises cortisol, worsens insulin resistance, and increases inflammation. All of these reduce blood flow. So when you put all of this together, the picture becomes very clear. The most common cause of erection problems is not age, and it's not a lack of hormones. It's impaired blood flow caused by metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, stress, and vascular damage. Sildenafil works because it directly addresses this bottleneck. It improves the efficiency of an existing pathway and allows blood vessels to do what they were designed to do. That's why it's effective, predictable, and backed by extensive research. But it's also why it shouldn't be viewed as a permanent fix on its own. If the underlying causes continue unchecked, circulation will continue to decline, and the medication may become less effective over time. The real solution is restoring vascular health. When blood vessels are flexible, responsive, and well-supported, everything works better. The medication becomes a tool rather than a crutch. And that's the key takeaway here. Blood flow is the foundation. Fix that, and the body often surprises you with how well it can recover. When you're evaluating any medication, especially one that affects something as important as circulation, the first question should always be this: how well is it actually studied? Not how popular it is, not how aggressively it's marketed, but how much real scientific data exists behind it. This is where sildenafil clearly separates itself from almost every other option. Sildenafil was the first medication in its class, which means it has been under scientific observation longer than any alternative. For decades now, researchers have studied its effects across different age groups, health conditions, and dosage ranges. Millions of men worldwide have used it, and that real-world data matters just as much as clinical trials. When a medication has been examined from so many angles for so long, patterns become very clear. Benefits, limits, and risks are well understood. One reason sildenafil gained such widespread acceptance is its very specific mechanism of action. It doesn't interfere broadly with hormones, brain chemistry, or nerve signaling. Instead, it focuses on one enzyme, PDE5, that regulates blood vessel relaxation. By targeting this single pathway, it minimizes unnecessary interference elsewhere in the body. This is a key point many people overlook. The body already knows how to regulate blood flow. The problem is not that the system is missing, it's that the signal fades too quickly. Sildenafil simply keeps that signal active longer. It doesn't create artificial stimulation or override natural controls. It supports a process that already exists. Because of this, sildenafil tends to feel predictable. The onset is relatively consistent, the duration is well understood, and the response aligns closely with the body's own timing. This predictability is one of the main reasons clinicians trust it. When something behaves consistently, it's easier to use safely and effectively. Now let's talk about dosage, because this is where misunderstandings are extremely common. Many people assume that stronger effects require higher doses. In reality, sildenafil follows a threshold effect. Once enough of the enzyme is blocked, increasing the dose doesn't dramatically improve results. What it does increase is the likelihood of side effects. This is why lower doses often work surprisingly well, especially in individuals with better vascular health. When blood vessels are flexible and responsive, they don't need excessive chemical support. The medication simply nudges the system in the right direction, and the body does the rest. This also explains why results vary so much between individuals. Two people can take the same dose and have very different experiences. The difference is rarely the medication itself. It's the condition of their blood vessels, nervous system, and metabolism. Someone with chronic inflammation, high blood sugar, and poor sleep has a body environment that actively resists circulation. In that case, the medication has to overcome multiple layers of resistance. The response may feel weaker or shorter-lived. On the other hand, someone with controlled blood sugar, good sleep, and low inflammation may respond strongly even at a minimal dose. This is not coincidence. It's physiology. Another advantage of sildenafil is how well its safety profile is understood. Because it has been used for so long, clinicians know exactly who should not use it and why. The most important contraindication involves nitrate-based medications, because the combination can excessively lower blood pressure. This interaction is well documented, not speculative. Outside of that specific situation, most side effects are mild and related to blood vessel dilation. Things like facial warmth, mild headache, or nasal congestion occur because blood flow is increasing. These effects are generally temporary and dose-dependent. Compare this to newer or less studied compounds, where long-term effects are still being evaluated. With sildenafil, there are no major unknowns. That level of certainty is rare and valuable. Now let's address the idea that sildenafil loses effectiveness over time. In most cases, the medication itself hasn't changed. The body has. Weight gain, worsening insulin resistance, increased stress, or declining sleep quality can all reduce responsiveness. When the underlying environment becomes less supportive of circulation, the same dose produces less noticeable effects. This is why focusing on overall health can actually make the medication work better over time, not worse. Improving diet, reducing sugar intake, increasing physical activity, and prioritizing sleep all enhance blood vessel function. When that happens, lower doses become effective again. This relationship is often misunderstood. People think they need more medication as they age, but what they actually need is better vascular support. The medication works best when it's assisting a healthy system, not compensating for a declining one. Another reason sildenafil stands out is its relatively short and controlled duration. It doesn't linger excessively in the body for most users. This reduces the risk of prolonged side effects and makes timing more flexible. The body clears it efficiently, which is part of why it's generally well tolerated. This shorter duration also reinforces the idea that sildenafil is a tool, not a replacement for natural function. It provides support when needed, but doesn't dominate the system for extended periods. Now let's look at the psychological aspect, because confidence plays a role, even though the root issue is physical. When someone uses a medication that works reliably, anxiety decreases. Reduced anxiety lowers stress hormones, which improves blood flow. This creates a positive feedback loop where the body becomes more responsive even before the medication is taken. This effect is not placebo, it's a real physiological response to reduced stress and improved nervous system balance. Again, sildenafil doesn't directly change the mind, but by stabilizing the physical response, it indirectly supports mental calm. Another point worth mentioning is that sildenafil does not interfere with long-term hormonal regulation. Unlike treatments that suppress or replace hormones, it leaves the endocrine system largely untouched. This makes it suitable for long-term use under proper guidance. But it's crucial to understand that long-term success depends on addressing foundational health factors. If someone relies solely on the medication while continuing habits that damage blood vessels, results will plateau or decline. The medication cannot reverse years of metabolic damage on its own. This is where nutrition becomes important. Diets high in refined carbohydrates and processed fats increase oxidative stress and inflammation. Over time, this stiffens blood vessels and reduces nitric oxide availability. By contrast, diets rich in whole foods, minerals, and healthy fats support vascular flexibility. Micronutrients also matter. Magnesium supports smooth muscle relaxation. Zinc supports enzyme function and cellular repair. Vitamin D influences endothelial health. When these are deficient, the vascular system becomes less responsive and medications appear less effective. Physical activity plays a role as well. Regular movement improves insulin sensitivity and stimulates nitric oxide production. This makes blood vessels more responsive not just during exercise but at rest. So when you look at sildenafil in context, its effectiveness is not just about the pill itself, it's about how well it integrates into the body's existing systems. The better those systems function, the less the medication has to compensate. That's why sildenafil remains the benchmark, not because it's magic, but because it works precisely where the problem usually exists. It has the strongest research base, a well-understood safety profile, predictable effects, and it cooperates with the body rather than overpowering it. The real takeaway here is this: medications are most effective when they're supporting health, not replacing it. Sildenafil does exactly that when used correctly. It amplifies natural blood flow mechanisms, and when combined with improved vascular health, it often works better at lower doses, with greater consistency and fewer issues. That combination is what leads to reliable, science-backed results over the long term. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that medication is the solution rather than a support. This misunderstanding leads to frustration, higher doses, and eventually disappointment. Medications like sildenafil are very effective at managing symptoms, but they do not correct the underlying problem. If you don't address the root causes, you're essentially trying to prop up a system that's still breaking down underneath. To understand why this matters, you have to look at what's really happening in the body long before symptoms appear. Long-term circulation issues don't start in the blood vessels alone. They start with metabolic dysfunction. When blood sugar is unstable and insulin levels are chronically elevated, the inner lining of blood vessels becomes damaged. This damage reduces nitric oxide production, increases stiffness, and limits the body's ability to regulate blood flow efficiently. Insulin resistance is one of the most common and overlooked contributors. You don't need to have diabetes for this to affect you. Years of consuming refined carbohydrates, sugars, and ultra-processed foods slowly push the body into a state where insulin no longer works efficiently. As insulin resistance increases, inflammation rises, blood vessels lose flexibility, and circulation becomes compromised. Inflammation itself is a major root cause. Chronic, low-grade inflammation acts like rust inside the vascular system. It narrows passageways, disrupts signaling, and interferes with normal relaxation of blood vessels. This type of inflammation is often driven by diet, poor gut health, lack of sleep, environmental toxins, and persistent stress. Now let's talk about stress, because this alone can undermine everything else. Chronic stress keeps the body locked in a survival state. Cortisol and adrenaline stay elevated far longer than they should. These hormones constrict blood vessels, raise blood pressure, and redirect blood flow away from functions the body doesn't consider immediately necessary for survival. If stress is constant, circulation never fully recovers. This is why people can be doing everything right on paper but still struggle. If the nervous system is overstimulated and never allowed to reset, blood flow will always be limited. No medication can fully override a chronically stressed nervous system. Sleep plays a much larger role than most people realize. During deep sleep, the body repairs blood vessels, balances hormones, and lowers inflammation. Chronic sleep deprivation raises cortisol, worsens insulin resistance, and increases oxidative stress. Even 1 hour less sleep per night over time significantly impacts vascular health. Nutrient deficiencies are another silent contributor. Modern diets are often calorie-dense, but nutrient-poor. Magnesium is essential for relaxing smooth muscle and blood vessels and calming the nervous system. Zinc is involved in enzyme activity, tissue repair, and hormone signaling. Vitamin D supports endothelial function and reduces inflammation. When these nutrients are low, blood vessels become less responsive, and circulation suffers. Omega-3 fats are also critical. They reduce inflammation, improve blood vessel flexibility, and support overall cardiovascular health. Without adequate omega-3 intake, the balance shifts toward stiffness and constriction. Now here's where the misunderstanding about medication becomes clear. Sildenafil works by enhancing a specific blood flow pathway. But if inflammation is high, insulin resistance is worsening, stress hormones are elevated, sleep is poor, and nutrients are depleted, the medication has to fight against all of that. It may still work, but not as well, not as consistently, and often with more side effects. When people say the medication stopped working, what usually happened is that the underlying health issues progressed. Weight increased, blood sugar control worsened, stress increased, sleep declined. The environment inside the body became less supportive of circulation. This is why relying on medication alone is not a long-term strategy. It treats the symptom without addressing the cause. Over time, the symptom becomes harder to manage because the root problem continues to grow. The good news is that the body is incredibly responsive when you start correcting these issues. Improving insulin sensitivity through diet changes can rapidly improve blood vessel function. Reducing sugar and refined carbohydrates lowers inflammation and restores nitric oxide production. Even modest improvements can make a noticeable difference. Physical activity is another powerful tool. Regular movement increases insulin sensitivity, stimulates nitric oxide release, and improves blood vessel flexibility. You don't need extreme workouts. Consistent walking, resistance training, and light cardio are enough to create meaningful changes. Stress management is not optional. Techniques like deep breathing, regular outdoor exposure, structured routines, and reducing overstimulation help reset the nervous system. When cortisol levels normalize, blood vessels relax more easily, and circulation improves naturally. Sleep hygiene matters more than supplements. Going to bed at a consistent time, reducing screen exposure at night, and creating a dark, quiet sleeping environment all support deeper sleep. Better sleep improves hormone balance, lowers inflammation, and enhances vascular repair. When these foundational factors improve, something interesting happens. The medication begins to work better, not worse. Lower doses become effective. Side effects decrease. The response feels more natural and more consistent. This is how medication is meant to be used, as a support, not a substitute, as a tool that assists recovery rather than masking decline. There's also a psychological shift that happens when the body starts responding consistently. Confidence increases, anxiety decreases, lower stress further improves circulation. This creates a positive cycle instead of a negative one. Another important point is that these improvements don't require perfection. Even partial correction of lifestyle factors can significantly enhance blood flow. The body doesn't need everything to be ideal. It just needs fewer obstacles. This is why some people are able to eventually reduce or even stop medication under proper guidance. As vascular health improves, the body regains its ability to regulate circulation on its own. The medication becomes less necessary because the system it was supporting has recovered. But that outcome only happens when the root causes are addressed. No pill can replace healthy blood vessels, balanced metabolism, and a regulated nervous system. So the real message here is not anti-medication, it's anti-dependence. Medication has a role, especially in the beginning. It can restore function, reduce anxiety, and provide short-term reliability, but long-term improvement comes from fixing what caused the problem in the first place. When insulin resistance is reduced, inflammation is controlled, stress is managed, sleep is restored, and nutrients are replenished, circulation improves at a foundational level. At that point, the body is no longer fighting against itself. That's when everything works better. The medication becomes more effective, not less. The need for higher doses disappears, and the results become consistent, predictable, and sustainable. And that's the difference between symptom management and real recovery.